with that, we're in part 3 of this series. And some of you have heard about this. Maybe some of you, this is your first time. But there's this thing called the genetic fallacy. Have you ever heard of this? And so this is basically an error in reasoning, and we are all prone to have errors in reasoning and how we kind of figure stuff out. Another name for it is the fallacy of origins or the fallacy of virtue. And so here's like an elementary definition of what the genetic fallacy is. Like I have a cat, which I was not a fan of when my wife sneakily brought it home one day. When it was a baby. I was not a cat person, and I still, when people ask me, I'm still not, but now I like this one particular cat. I wouldn't like your cat, but I like mine. So I'm a one cat lover. And so we've got this cat. The cat, this is a dumb example, but it'll help you understand. It's got 4 legs, obviously. I mean, not obviously, but ours does. And I don't know where I'm going with this. And then a dog has generally 4 legs. And so a fallacy of reasoning is to say that my cat is my dog because they both have 4 legs, right? It just doesn't work. Or because somebody lives in a huge high-rise apartment, like spacious, they're like, well, their apartment must be big. Well, not necessarily. So that's an error in reasoning, and we're prone to do it all the time. And genetic fallacy happens when people discount the reliability of information based on the source of the information, like where it's coming from, the person that it's coming from, rather than the merits of the information. Like this is always dangerous with these examples, but your mother-in-law could tell you something and immediately like, no, I'm not listening to that. And you don't even know what the information is. It's just because it's her, you're not going to listen to it. Or there's that one guy at the office and he says something that you feel like could be an observation about you, your situation that's true, but you're like, that guy's crazy. And you don't like resist it because of the merits, you resist it because of the source. Another example is if I got up here and cited some, information I got from a media outlet, immediately when I referenced it, 50% of you would be like, no, that's not true. I wouldn't even get to finish. You wouldn't even know the information, but you would just discount it because of the source. And then I would do I could cite another one, and then the other 50% of you would be like, that's not true. And we do it, and it's human nature with all of us. We do it before we even know if the information is reliable. But because of the source, we just automatically discount it and think that it's not true. And my point in all that is if you do that in regard to your life, your relationships, your big decisions, what's coming next, your career, your faith journey, like you have the potential of falling prey to this genetic fallacy, this fallacy of origins and virtues, and missing things that are key in regard to your future and the decisions that shape your future. So that's what I want to talk about for a couple minutes. We're in part 3 of the series, Challenge Accepted. To catch you up real quick, we have all watched people, as we've said, make just train wreck decisions in relationships, a decision about a habit, where they move, priorities that they take on, even really bad decisions in regard to their faith journey if you're a follower of Jesus. I mean, it's all over the map, career decisions. And then a lot of time, because a lot of those decisions, whether you want to admit it, are based on where we live, our experience, we're prone to certain things. It's so easy for us to be judgmental, and don't leave me up here on this, like I know this is everybody, where you'll look at somebody and go, I would never do that. And the reality is like the whole I would never do that. Like, yes, you would. I mean, there's the potential. If you're it's so easy to discount somebody else's circumstances, where they live, their experience, how they've been treated. If the circumstances are right, you can do it just about anything. And so it's so easy to go, I would never. But as we've said throughout the series, the only thing about that is you have participated in every single one of your bad decisions. Like we are the common denominator for all of our regret. We were there for all of it. And then the other thing we've said is a single bad decision. This is why this is such a big deal. A single bad decision always is the first step. Now, it happens over time, and generally it's sequential, small steps, but it always starts with a first step, a first decision, a first line, a first step toward undermining your own future. And so in this series, what we're trying to do is identify those internal struggles before they get too big, and before they get to the place where we just have unnecessary regret. And we're all going to have it, but you don't want to pile up a bunch of unnecessary stuff when you don't have to. How do we identify it before we undermine our own future, our own faith journey, our own relationships, our own view of ourselves? So week 1, we said the challenge, this is a challenge, is number 1, pay attention to the what? That when you're on the verge of a decision, an invite, an option, and you feel this thing that bothers you, you should let it bother you. You should let it bother you rather than trying to sell yourself on a bad idea. You almost never have to sell yourself on good ideas. You should let it bother you until it goes away or you are led to go a different direction. Week 2, we said the second challenge was pay attention to what? That all of us have narratives, all of us have stories. A lot of times we don't know what they are. We've never identified them. And a lot of times they're not even correct. They're based on, again, how we were raised and treated and where we lived and how we were born, theology growing up. And out of those narratives, they shape how we view our reactions, our responses, our feelings, our self-talk. And those narratives shape decisions that have the potential, again, to cause us to become our own worst enemy, that have the potential to lead us to the place where we undermine our future. Today, I want to look at the third challenge. Pay attention to the voices of what? Wisdom around you. Pay attention to the voices of wisdom around you. All of us have a circumstance where we can look back and we just kind of ignored that thing or ignored that person, and then we regret it. Like on the other side, we wish we would have paid attention. And here's the thing, our worst decisions are always preceded by a series of unwise decisions. Not necessarily immoral, not illegal. You could even defend them. You could get by with them. Somebody else may even cheer you on. They're not even wrong. They're just unwise. This is the thing where we so fall into a trap because we're always looking at all of the other stuff that's big, easy to identify. But things that lead us off are oftentimes subtle. They're just a series of unwise decisions that lead us to the place where ultimately we have regret that we can't always unwind from. And usually there's somebody around you. If you place yourself in the right place and you're willing to listen, they feel the tension before you do. And a lot of times, because they're kind of an objective out, they can connect the dots before you do. And part of the reason they can do that is because they are not susceptible to the internal narratives that tend to sell you on stuff that's not a good idea. And so one of the most extraordinary things, I'll come back to this later in the message, that you can do in regard to your life, anytime I'm sitting down with young leaders or mentoring somebody, it's one of the first things I go to. If you can learn to make this a habit of your life, really a preemptive habit, this will save you in so many circumstances and lead you in so many others if you can lean into the voices of wisdom. So there's this story in the Hebrew Bible, which, by the way, your Old Testament is the Hebrew Bible, which is important to understand. It's not a book. It is a collection. It is a library of documents. And so you've got the Torah, the Hebrew Bible, which is now what we call the Old Testament. And in there, in 1 Kings, which when the Bible was assembled, there was no chapter and verse. But in 1 Kings 12, as we know it now, there's a story about the fourth king of Israel. And what I'm hoping for a few minutes, it's a long narrative, so I'm going to truck through it fast, but it's so important. I think identifies this so well. But I'm hoping for some of you that this will just kind of ease some of your resistance where maybe you're in the place right now where there's a voice or two that you need to lean into and you just won't do it. That this narrative might ease some of that tension. So in 1 Kings 12, and I'm going to back up a little bit in a second to give you context, but it centers around the fourth king of Israel. The context is the nation of Israel had Saul as their first ever king, and many of you know this. Then David, of David and Goliath fame, takes over, and then David's son Solomon takes over. And then it was assumed, because this is how it generally worked, that your heir, your son would take over as the next king, and so that after Solomon, his son Rehoboam would be king. Now, to understand the story, though, is that you have to know about Jeroboam. A little confusing. Rehoboam was Solomon's sons. Jeroboam is just like a guy that works in a cubicle in Israel. You'll find out in a second, does some stuff and just has this crazy story that sets the stage for everything we're going to talk about. So in 1 Kings 11, it picks up. Let me give you a little bit of the context, and then we'll dive into the actual part of the narrative I want to get to. So you guys still with me? Okay. Here's what it says. Now, Jeroboam was a man of standing. And when Solomon saw how well, Solomon the king, this young man did his work, he put him in charge of the entire labor force. So again, Jeroboam's like, I think he's more than data entry, but he's in the cubicle, he's doing his thing. And Solomon's like, well, we're going to elevate you over the entire labor force, like the promotion of a lifetime. And by the way, this labor force, not a small thing. It's about approximately 150,000 workers, generally stone cutters and transporters that were a part of these massive building projects. If you've seen some of this in ancient times, it's amazing what they were able to do. So he's going to be in charge of all of this. He's like, pack your stuff up from the cubicle. You're getting a corner office. And a massive raise out of nowhere, and he becomes in charge of the entire labor force. In verse 29, about that time, Jeroboam was going out of Jerusalem, doing his work. He's just started his new job, and Ahijah, the prophet of Shiloh, met him. Ahijah was the prophet at the time. They were basically like spokesmen for God, to kind of just put it at street level. No disrespect. Oftentimes, if you just read, the prophets did really weird stuff. And so Ahijah runs into Jeroboam, and he immediately starts cutting his robe into pieces. And with no context, Jeroboam's like, what are you doing? And he cuts his robe into pieces, and then he gives Jeroboam 10 of the pieces, and he keeps 2. And again, Jeroboam completely confused, but in ancient times, oftentimes prophets did really weird stuff. And so verse 31, the prophet turns to Jeroboam and says, see, I'm going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand, and I'm going to give it to the 10 tribes. Because God has told me, God's spoken to me basically, that the whole kingdom's going to be divided. And this massive kingdom now is going to be 12 provinces, 12 tribes. And 10 of them are going to be given to you. And Jeroboam's like, I was just in a cubicle. Now I'm in charge of the entire labor force. And now I'm going to lead the large majority of a kingdom? Are you kidding me? He's like, yeah, you're going to lead the 10 provinces and tribes. And then I'm going to keep 2 in the family. Now, here's part of the reasoning for this, if you're wondering why. Solomon, at this point, who's the king, off the rails. As was the case with most ancient people, and you see that we romanticize a lot of these guys, Solomon off the rails. At this point, he had accumulated something like 700 wives, lots of concubines, and tons of idols. Like literally he had a collection of idols or little gods. And the reason he got these is because every wife had a different god. And so every time he would marry somebody, he's like, well, your god's cool. And so he would adopt their gods. So he had a massive collection of wives, massive collection of gods. And God, capital G, is like, enough. And not only that, other side note, Solomon began to do what all the other kings of the world did, which is to treat the people that he was supposed to be serving and leading as slaves. And so the prophet comes to go, there's an expiration date on this, no more. Verse 34, but I'm not going to take the whole kingdom out of Solomon's hand because I promised David. And so Jeroboam can't believe it. Again, opportunity, raise, position of a lifetime. He starts to tell everybody, word begins to spread. Verse 40, predictably, Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam. Everybody saw that coming. Because that's what every king did in the ancient world. But Jeroboam did what? But Jeroboam fled Egypt and stayed there until Solomon's death, because the assumption was when Solomon dies, Rehoboam, his son's going to take over. And so there's going to be no challengers to the throne. And so initially Rehoboam or Jeroboam just gets out of the way, flees for his life. And then this is where the narrative really picks up in 1 Kings 12. Rehoboam, again, Solomon's son, went to Shechem. For all Israel had gone down there to make him king or coronate him king, because he's next in line. And when Jeroboam heard this, because he's still in Egypt, he had fled for his life from Solomon, he returned from Egypt. Verse 3, so they sent for Jeroboam, and he and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, your father put a heavy yoke on us. Basically, Jeroboam now is safe to come back. He's a part of a large group of people who are basically kind of figuring out what's this new king about. And they begin to ask him questions and make a request. And so their opening statement is, your father laid a heavy yoke on us. Like most kings of the world, treat us like slaves. And I mean, the most prosperous time in our nation's history, but I think most people can agree that Solomon is kind of off the rails. So here's our request. Lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke that he put on us, and we'll serve you. Because we know how the kingdoms of the world work in this era of history. And so we will serve you willingly, because this is how we, make a living and eat and live indoors. But you got to remove the heavy taxation, and you've got to stop with these massive building projects that are driving us into the ground. We cannot withstand this. We're treated like slaves. The conditions are unbearable, and we can't take it anymore. And so at this point, Rehoboam actually makes 2 really good decisions. And first decision, Rehoboam answered, okay, go away 3 days, and then come back to me. So the people went away, because Rehoboam's like, okay, I'm just getting started. I don't know a lot. I'm brand new on the job. There's a lot of people who've served under, my father for decades. So it's kind of a good idea. I think they might be right. I think this may be the way forward, my way to gain influence and lead this kingdom unified and lead it well. So he's like, you go away for 3 days. I'm going to think about it and get advice, and I'll come back to you, or you guys come back to me. And so King Rehoboam consulted who? Yeah, right here. Consulted who? The elders. Consulted the elders who had served his father during his lifetime, which is the second really good decision. Like all of these guys right here had served his father for decades. Now, Solomon was off the rails in regard to his personal decision. The kingdom was not. There was prosperity like the nation had never seen before. They basically had peace on every side. It was unbelievable. It was as good as it could ever get, despite Solomon's really bad behavior. So, all this to say, these elders, they'd seen a lot. They had a lot of wisdom. They had decades of leading this nation to the pinnacle of what they would never see again. And so he goes to consult these guys, as you would think that he would, and said, okay, guys, you've been at this for a long time. I started like 3 weeks ago. How would you advise me to answer these people? And they replied, if today you will be a what? If today you'll be a servant. I know you're the king, and I know how the kings of this world work. But if you'll willingly, as a king, act like a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they'll always be your servants, meaning you'll always have influence. You will be a king that's worth following. If you want a unified kingdom, if you want to lead well, if you want to have credibility, basically put their interest ahead of your interests. See, this is really the litmus test for any leadership, anytime. Leadership is not the title you have, the position, the placard on your desk, whether you have a corner office or not. Look at how Jesus defines leadership in the New Testament. Leadership is basically influence. If you have influence, you are a leader. And Jesus went out of his way to go, and if you want to be a leader worth following, this is what a leader worth following does. She puts the interest of other people ahead of themselves. It's like, if you want to lead well, this is what it looks like for you. And so Rehoboam listens, takes it all in, like, yeah, I hear you. Thank you, guys, you're dismissed. They walk out of the conference room. I'm making that part up. But they walk out, and Rehoboam's like, what do these old guys know? I get they've led for a long time, but they're probably past retirement age. Things are changing, culture's changing. I want to make some changes to the kingdom. What do they really know about leading right now and about what we're facing right now? So I get it. You guys have done some stuff. You've seen some stuff, but you're kind of old. So verse 8, Rehoboam did what? Rejected the advice that the elders gave him, despite their experience, despite their wisdom, despite what they had done, despite their track record. And here's the thing. And I think more than we want to admit and more than we are comfortable with, we relate to this. It was exactly what he needed to hear. This was exactly what Rehoboam needed to hear. It was not what Rehoboam wanted to do. And as we've said throughout this series, when you want what you want and your desires and your wishes and your plans and the voices that are in your ear start to align with the circumstances, it is so hard not to give in. It is so hard not to act. It is so hard not to take the quickest route to where you want to get rather than the most wise route or the most ethical route. It was what he needed to hear. It was not what he wanted to do. And ultimately, it was actually the only way to get to where he wanted to be. But he just ignored it. And instead, and I know we want to equate this to our middle schooler, what I'm about to say, but nobody ever grows out of this. He leans in to the voices that will tell him exactly what he wants to hear. Exactly whether it's true or not, whether it's right or not, he just wants to hear what he wants to hear. And so he leans into the voices that are going to tell him exactly what he wants to hear. When we do this in our own life, because we already, come on, and I'm with you, I'm not calling you out. We already have a track record of looking back at some decisions that we really wanted, some seasons where we were really, we were trying to move it forward despite some of the red flags. And it did not end well for us. That when you begin to filter out these voices, you are one step away from becoming your own worst enemy, from undermining your future. This is the quickest route to eventually give up respect, give up influence, in some cases to give up opportunity, to even give up resources. This is how you end up exactly where you don't want to be. So here's the question real quick, and I'll dive back in the narrative. Whose advice are you currently ignoring? Whose advice have you been ignoring for a long time? In some cases, you're ignoring the advice because of the source of the advice. Now, I'm not talking about a source that is unwise. We get lots of voices, lots of people, lots of narratives that you should ignore. Like in my job, I get lots of advice. Not all that, a lot of that advice is not worth leaning into, right? We all have lives like that. I'm talking about the people that you actually, there's some level of trust, there's some level of track record, there's some level of wisdom, and you just decide you're not going to lean in. Whose advice are you currently ignoring? And then here's the other question I want you to start thinking about. What's the narrative in your mind that somehow allows you to resist that? Because all of us tell a story about, what could they possibly know about that? My circumstance is different. They always say that. They're kind of a naysayer. We always have an excuse. We always have a narrative. We always have a way of getting around and justifying why we can ignore that voice, even though we know we should probably lean into that voice. I'm just telling you, when you feel that, you should just stop. Because you may be a couple steps away from leaning into a fallacy of reasoning that's leading you in a place that you don't want to go. And here's another thing we'll get to at the end. And it may be in some ways, that voice, the voice of God that's leading you where he ultimately wants you. And so Rehoboam, back to verse 8, rejected the advice of the elders that they had given him, consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were what? All the dudes he went to college with. Everybody his age, they had all started working. They all had 3 weeks of experience. Nobody had done this before. Nobody had been a part of this, but all of the guys that were on the payroll. Like, again, you know this already. When the only people who have access to you are the people who need something from you, you're in a dangerous place. And for some of us, I'm even talking about your family, because their family dynamics where there's people that need something from you. And this is so difficult in our culture of autonomy and independence. I'm going to do my thing. It's nobody's business. But to invite somebody else in outside of that, and they don't need anything from you. If there is nobody like that in your life around big decisions, your faith journey, about what's coming next, and I understand it's hard. Sometimes it even feels humiliating or humbling. I'm telling you, you're in a dangerous place, because a lot of times we're only leaning into the voices of people who need something from us. And that's exactly what Rehoboam did in those circumstances. And so he asked them, what's your advice? You guys have been working here 3 weeks like me. How much wisdom have you gained? Let me glean from that. How should we answer these people who say to me, lighten the yoke that your father put on us? Because, again, I'll move on. You can always find somebody. You can always find somebody to tell you what you want to hear in order to do what you want to do. The problem, though, with always doing what you want to do is that eventually you arrive at a place that you don't really want to be. And you undermine your own future, which is exactly what happens to Rehoboam. Verse 10, the young men who had grown up with him, they were all in the same fraternity, replied, these people have said to you, your father put a heavy yoke on you, but make our yoke lighter. Tell them this, ridiculous. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist, which when you read that the first time, you're like, what are you talking about? In the ancient times, apparently Solomon was a large man. We don't know his BMI or anything, but he was a large man. And in ancient times, that was a sign that you were healthy and wealthy. It wasn't true most of the time, you're anything but healthy. But in their culture, it's like the larger you were, the healthier and wealthier you were. Solomon was a big dude. So what Rehoboam basically is saying, the comparison here is, you think my father was a lot? You think it was hard under him? You have not seen anything yet. Wait till you see what I do. And so verse 11, my father laid a heavy yoke on you. I'm going to make it heavier. And he doubles down on the whole thing. My father scourged you with whips. I'm going to scourge you with scorpions. I remember this in Sunday school, and this always confused me. I'm like, that's next level. Not only whip them, but you're using scorpions to do it. Like, that is extreme. Not actual scorpions. This is like a whip with metal and stone in it. And the implication is here is my father treated you like slaves. This was reserved for criminals. I'm about to treat you like criminals. I'm going to double down on the whole thing. The elders have no idea what they're talking about. Times have changed. New techniques are needed. And so verse 12, 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to Rehoboam. And the king answered the people harshly. Doing what? Rejecting the advice of the very people he should have been leaning into. rejecting the advice given to him by the elders, the only people who had any experience and knew what they were talking about, but what they were talking about didn't line up with what Rehoboam actually wanted to do. Rejected the advice of the elders. And this is so interesting as you look at the history of all this. The moment that he rejects their advice, he seals the nation's fate forever. A series of unwise decisions led to a catastrophic decision. And just historically, from this moment on, the nation would never be the same again. In verse 14, he told them, my father made your yoke heavy, I'm gonna make it heavier. My father scourged you with whips, you're getting scorpions. Verse 16, when all Israel saw that the king refused to what? Refused to listen to what was right in front of him, the voices right in front of him, refused to listen to them. They answered the king. In fact, they kind of brought a delegation together. There was enough of them that they had influence, and they weren't really scared of Rehoboam. And they selected this guy by the name of Sheba, who led a rebellion under David, and he becomes their spokesman. He stands up, and he says to Rehoboam after his kind of State of the Union, what share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son in light of what you just told us? To your tents, Israel. Look after your own house, David. Basically, talking about the kingdom of David and Solomon and his line. Go build your own cities. Go build your own palaces. We have enough influence that we're not going to have anything to do with this, and we're not going to recognize your rule. So the Israelites went home. But as for the Israelites who were living in the towns of Judah, Rehoboam still ruled over them. But he only had 2 provinces. The other 10 were given to Jeroboam. The king was divided forever. And King Rehoboam sent out Adoniram, who was in charge of forced labor, and all of Israel stoned him to death. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. And in that moment, almost the moment of the decision, the kingdom was divided. It became ultimately vulnerable. It became invadable. This is exactly what happens when you don't pay attention to the voices of wisdom in your life. Like, you have got to find someone or several someones who have nothing to lose and nothing to gain, and lean into those voices of wisdom in your life. So here's the question that I want to end with, if it's up here. I'm not sure it will be. If not, that's fine. The question is just this, and this is a question that is so hard to ask. The verge of that relationship, that decision, that next part of my faith journey, that thing I feel like God's calling me to step out to do, that habit, the thing I'm ignoring, the thing that I'm like, well, I'm different, my context is different, my story is different. Well, you don't know, you're not smart enough, you're too old. Well, what's the 1 or 2 voices of wisdom on this side of a decision, or maybe potentially several unwise decisions that are not even immoral, that are not even wrong, that are not even, they're not illegal, they're just unwise, but every bad decision starts with a series of unwise decisions. What if you ask this question every season, every big decision on the front end? What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you guys just say that with me real quick? What would you do if you were in my shoes? One more time. What would you do if you were in my shoes? And here's the thing. This question is not about selling yourself on anything. You rarely have to sell yourself on a good idea. The moment you do, it's probably not a good idea. This is a different kind of question. But the question you also have to ask with this is, why are you so resistant to ask this? And for a lot of us, we are so resistant to ask this question. And I think there's a couple reasons. I think one of the reasons is because in a lot of cases, the 1 or 2 people, and again, I'm not talking about the voices where it's like, there's certain voices you should tune out. I'm talking about the 1 or 2 voices that in any other season, you'd lean into them. Voices that have a track record, the voices that maybe know more than you do are up ahead, and there is some kind of track record of wisdom, and there's 1 or 2 voices, and the reason we won't ask this question is in some cases, we know what those voices would tell us, don't we? And we don't want to lean into them, which means if there are voices of wisdom around you and you already know what they will say, you should just go ahead and do that. You should just go ahead and lean into it. If you already know that the voices of wisdom are going to tell you one thing, but somehow you're trying to sell yourself that you're different, that you're unique, that your circumstances are, you should just go ahead and lean into it. The other thing that I think we resist this on account of is we don't think it's anybody else's business. And I'm going to tell you, there's different people listening from all over, but specifically if you live where we live in the United States, there is such a premium on autonomy. It's like the goal of life. I want to be autonomous. I want to be independent. I want to be my own person. I want to make my own decision. And so this is so foreign to us. Like, this isn't anybody else's business. My relationships, my financial things, my deal, my, what's up ahead, my big decision, nobody else's deal, nobody else's business. This is an invitation. Because you care so much about your future, and more importantly, your Heavenly Father cares so much about your future. This is an invitation for somebody else to make it their business. Because your life is too important. God's will and desire and dream for you is too important. And how your decisions impact other people are too important. I mean, the reality is that like wise people, they invite other people in, because here's the thing, you probably know this already. Private decisions always have public consequences. Even if it's localized, it might not be on the news, but private decisions always have public consequences. They never stay private, which is why if you've ever met a wise person, and it's not that their life is pain-free, problem-free, or everything's gone great. They have maybe some really big bumps, but they have lived consistently toward this path of wise decision-making. I'll tell you why they've been able to do that. Wise people invite other people to make it their business. That's why they're wise. Then one last thing, I'll move on. The other reason we don't do this is because success is intoxicating. And if we've had success in one area of our life, we think that translates to other areas of our life. Because you were a great entrepreneur, led that business, you think it's going to make you great over here. Because you were great at relationships in this season, you're going to be great over here. Because you made good decisions in this realm, you're going to make good decisions in this realm, or because of this or that, and all of these other external factors. And because we've had success in one area of our life, we think it translates to other areas of our life. But success does not make you smarter. Some of you, not to be too in your face, some of you have met some dumb, successful people where they were successful in one realm, but it did not translate to other realms of their life. Because here's the thing, success, you just need to know this, success at some level actually just makes you careless. And in some cases, it even makes you clueless. I mean, I can't tell you the number of guys or dads I've heard tell me like, well, I was a kid once, so I feel equipped to raise one. I've never felt that. I have felt clueless in every single season. And so just this one area, and maybe this is because of my own awareness, of my own inadequacy, I cannot imagine not inviting other people into this journey. Where like every moment I think like I've kind of gotten it down, I'm a pretty good parent, mark it down. The next week I feel like things are flying out of control and I'm terrible and I have no idea what I'm talking about. But it's true of just about every arena of life. Success does not make you smarter. Wise people lean in and allow other people to make it their business because somebody can see what you can't see. And I'm going to close with this. But somebody with that decision, that relationship, that thing, your faith journey, what you should do next, whether you should prioritize that, whether you should move. And it's not immoral, it's not wrong, it's not criminal, but it may be unwise. And every big regret starts with a series of unwise, explainable decisions that eventually you wish you could take back. Somebody can see what you can't see. They can connect the dots. They feel the tension before you feel the tension. The reason that they do is because they are not swayed by your internal narratives. They're not going to sell yourself. They're not going to sell themselves on a bad decision for you because they have no reason to. So the declaration is this: I will not automatically discount advice based on the source of that advice, maybe the context of that advice, what I feel in regard to that advice. I will not automatically discount advice based on the source of that advice. And that leads us to challenge number 3. Pay attention to the voices of wisdom around you. Can you guys just say that with me? Pay attention to the voices of wisdom around you. Wise voices set you up for wise choices. That ultimately, when you lean in to the voices of wisdom, it's not going to be perfect, but things go better. And when you don't, you undermine your future. It always begins with a series of unwise decisions. But when you lean into these voices, you make better decisions. You have fewer regret. Ultimately, you avoid becoming your own worst enemy in ways that are avoidable. And I'm just telling you, if I could emphasize this greater than I already am, I have so many seasons like everybody else where like there's regret of, man, I should have leaned into that voice, but I have so many seasons because this has just been front of mind because I was taught this at a younger age, and I'm so grateful where there's so many seasons I can look back on. And I had no idea what I was doing in the moment, and what I wanted was the opposite of what the voices of reason and wisdom were telling me. And I can look back at so many circumstances, and I'm so glad I leaned in to those voices when I didn't want to hear them, when I was annoyed at them, when I was trying to discredit them because I knew they were right, but what they said didn't align with what I wanted to do. Like this is a huge deal for every single one of us because it's not just about you, as we said at the beginning. It's about the people around you. And this is why we talk about this kind of stuff in different series. Because it is at the center of following Jesus, who gave us a singular command. I want you to love other people the way that I've loved you. I want you to love yourself and love others the way that God has loved you in Jesus. And if you're a follower of Jesus, and if you're not, you don't have to do any of this. But if you're a follower of Jesus, that commandment demands that we love other people the way that Jesus has loved us, because when you hurt you, when you make decisions that undermine your future, when you hurt you and you hurt somebody else. And ultimately, when you hurt the heart of your Heavenly Father because you are made in the image of God. So this doesn't matter just because of some moral conformity or just because of making decisions or just because of having a better future. This matters because if you are a follower of Jesus, if you want to love well, you cannot love well and hurt you and hurt other people around you. You forfeit the opportunity of living that command out well. And then the other thing is this: God desires, we said in week 1, trust more than obedience. Every great relationship, which is what Jesus wants, the foundation of that relationship is trust. It's no better than the level of trust. And when you lean into those voices, whether you realize it or not, in a lot of cases, you are leaning into the voice of a God who loves you, that says, trust me with all your heart. Don't lean to your own understanding. Pay attention to what I have set up in your life. Humble yourself, and I will make your paths straight. Pay attention to the voices of wisdom that are around you. Would you guys stand with me? Jesus, thank you so much that even in our tendency to overcomplicate things, which we do, and for the Jesus followers in the room, we can so overcomplicate things sometimes in terms of trying to read signs and take Bible verses out of context and try to figure out how you're speaking through this or that sometimes just doesn't add up when honestly, your voice is tangible and it's real and it's right around us, and it's in the one or two voices that we just don't want to lean into because we're trying to figure out how to hear what we want to hear in order to do what we want to do. And I just pray if we're in that place right now, and we've all been there, that you'd give us wisdom to see it and then courage to change direction. Again, not because of just this isn't about moral conformity. It's about following Jesus, and that you have a will and a plan and a destiny for our life, and that you are for us. So help us just to acknowledge one of the ways that is so uncomfortable. It is such a challenge. But maybe for some of us, for the first time in our life, because it's been nobody's business and it's our thing and we're independent, we need help. And you've placed help around us, and we need to lean into it. Give us the courage to do that. I pray for others. They're not even sure they believe. They're not sure if you are real, and they've been so hurt in your name. I just pray today that maybe you'd remove one or two of those obstacles and barriers, and they'd begin to see who you are and what it means to actually follow you. And we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.